Hei og velkommen til Dagsorden. Vi ser til USA, og USA ser til oss, fordi vi er alle under den samme tommelen. Og den tommelen den er overnasjonale organisasjoner og nettverk som påvirker våre politikere, som igjen foretar politikk som ikke er i folks interesse. I 2015 fikk Europa en migrasjonskrise fra Midtøsten, eller det utvidede Midtøsten. Og det er den samme krisen som USA nå står i, altså en grenseløs grense hvor hvem som helst kan ta seg inn, og man ikke vet hvem som kommer. Til å snakke litt om hvordan det foregikk i Tyskland, under denne tiden, tidlig 2015, 2014, 2016, har vi gleden av å ønske velkommen Jay Furman. Welcome, Jay.
Hello, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for taking your time out to come on. We met at America Fest this weekend, and you have some very interesting stories. It was 28 years that you were in the Navy, is that correct?
That's correct.
So you were stationed in Germany about the time where mass migration really took a hold of Europe.
Yes, that's correct. We arrived in 2013 and left in 2016. So right in the middle of it.
Can you, from an American point of view, talk a little bit about what that was like? What was it like when you came in 2013, and how did that develop through 2015 and 16?
Sure. So when we arrived in Germany, it was picture book. My family and I landed in Frankfurt and had a fun time driving from Frankfurt to Stuttgart and learning the culture through the new signs and really just embracing the clean German culture, the very orderly German culture. We embraced the German sense of civic duty and responsibility to everyone and to follow the rule of law. So much so, we sent our kids to a Swiss international school across town. Our children from 8 years old to 12 took the train together by themselves with the other German children every day to ride 45 minutes to their school and back. And we never thought anything of it. And that began in 2013 and continued until Angela Merkel accepted the 1 million migrants from northern Iraq and Syria, and immediately we started noticing some changes when they came and started arriving in 15 and through 16 time frame. And I might have some of my dates wrong, but it felt like overnight dormitories were built throughout the country near train stops in every little village. And you didn't see it in the international press, certainly in the national press, but the local newspapers reported on the impacts to the population, such that we did not send our kids to school anymore by themselves, and things got very unsafe for ladies to ride trains and public transportation, and we saw kind of a tense sort of feeling across the country from the time that we arrived to the time we left. It had changed. It was a different feeling in Germany, and we really felt like we were watching the beginning of an end of an era. And you go to a Christmas market, and you still feel the German culture, but by the end, in other places, it was not the same. And so it was unfortunate to see. And it turns out we were witnessing a whole bigger phenomenon, but I know you guys are feeling out there in Norway.
Yes, so we went from safe to unsafe, all these people pouring into the country. You can't send your kids to school alone anymore. We know that there was a lot of raping going on in this time period, and still is in Europe, with this mass migration that we've had over the past years. And it's interesting to get your perspective on this, Jay, because you have an issue in the US with an open border policy going on under the regime of Joe Biden or Joe Obama or whatever you want to call it. We don't really know who pulls the strings, do we? But So Europe has had this problem for a lot longer, I would say, in the size of it all since 2015. You were abroad. You saw this happen in real time. What was the people's reactions in Germany? Did you talk to the locals? What were their reaction to what was going on?
Absolutely. I think every German thought it was going to be like when they welcomed the Turkish population into Germany. And really, when we arrived, the Turkish population and the Germans who became Germans, but the Turkish descended Germans had fully assimilated into the population, learned the language, were part of the industry, an important portion of the population. I think they thought the northern Iraqi Syrians would be much like that, but they were way different. Friends that we had in the church tried to host some of these families and groups and offered a lot of goodwill and services to them. It didn't work because I think it was too fast, too many, and a population that didn't have a Western mindset. The Turks, they were certainly more westernized. Ataturk and the democratic experiment there really was a better match. But here in the population that came when I was on board Germany, that was not. They were not ready to become German, and many actually went back. But many didn't, and there were the worst outcomes, and it's not all of them, but certainly enough to scare Germans not to take public transportation and send their kids alone to school, and they and things would go missing, and things offered were abused or taken for granted, and I think that it does look like the U.S. Situation right now. But this is not a new phenomenon, and I'm coming to learn that this is a way of changing a country from within, using migrant movements as blunt force instruments to really to use the goodness of a population against itself. Because truly, on the U.S. southwestern border, we have a flood of migrants coming north. And I see the same things. There's parallels all over. And, when I was in Europe, I was trying to tell leadership that the migrant flows that were coming, because I did a lot of work in Africa, and I knew what was sitting on the northern coast of Africa, and I knew what was in Syria and northern Iraq. And I couldn't get anybody to listen that we have wolves, and this is an English, U.S. thing, but wolves in sheep's clothing coming over into these migrant flows, meaning there's hidden bad people hidden in the populations moving within the country that's hosting them now, either willingly or unwillingly, and those people can hide among those populations, and it was true soon after the Brussels attack happened, Nice attack happened, and things, and then it just kind of and then small low intensity attacks have continued throughout Europe, and you guys have felt some of the same sort of disruption. I feel like we're written for the same, and we should have paid attention to Europe as a U.S. population, but we didn't. And Europeans, I guess, should have paid attention to what happens in Africa all day long. Countries are split apart by one population being scared into another one and then fracturing it from within. I was in the Central African Republic, and we were trying to put that country back together with the UN, which I'm not sure the UN really intended to do that. But so, it is a tool of, and a great term out of Scandinavia, I think it was. I don't know who used it, maybe the Dutch first, and they just had a great result recently with the population pushing back. But these are weapons of mass migration, and people don't understand it's not the UN refugee version of this. These are poor souls that are being foisted into another population as kind of human cannonballs, and whether they're well intended or malintended. The impact upon both is catastrophic. So these are not just normal refugee movements when you come to this scale. And then when you have populations that are so different from each other, assimilation doesn't happen. The idea of political Islam is an anathema, is a complete opposite of Western society. There's no accommodating other cultures in that. And when you move to someone else's land and you don't try to accept your host's customs and their traditions, and try to become part of a productive society there, then on the outset, religion aside, that's a non-starter, and really that's just a bad house guest. And for here in the U.S., we are seeing the same thing. We've had probably about 9 million people come over. Government disclosed 9 million. There are many more that have come through. And it's really a policy issue here, which I feel like knowing very little about the Norwegian version of this, but I understand there too, in trying to help folks come over. And I'm sure we said the same thing, but in January 2021 and the Biden-Obama changing of our rules, through executive order and a fait accompli, we said, come on in. And we messaged that to everyone in the world. And Americans were really unwitting to this. We didn't know it. And so people responded and they came. If you look at the population migration flows into the U.S. from January 2021 to date, to now, it's almost an order of merit increase. And we have wolves in sheep's clothing here too. And really, we know that our enemies are massing south of our border. We know that China is pumping fentanyl or the precursors to that to the Mexican border. We know that Mexico is in lockstep with the government in Beijing, and we know that that both are working with the cartels. And so that is a really bad mixture for us. And so we need to sit up and pay attention to what you guys are doing, and maybe our for you guys, maybe it's Brussels, right? And so, people are making rules for you guys at a distance. It doesn't make sense for those at the local level. And that's really what's happening here. Our national government is making decisions for the people from ocean to ocean that don't really make sense for the people. And it's dangerous, super dangerous. It's almost an explosive level of dangerous. And so for the U.S., what our leadership wants is either more votes for the people in power, because everybody south of the United States walking up this way screams Biden. They love the administration that's let them in. But he's doing the biggest Democrat giveaway in history. He's giving away American sovereignty. He's giving away the hope of residency and citizenship one day. But it's not Ellis Island. What Americans need to understand, and maybe Norwegians or Europeans, that it's not the hope of a new life, at least on the American southwestern border. It's not the Statue of Liberty welcoming people in. That welcome mat is a meat grinder, killing literally tens of thousands of people on the way up, raping them along the way up, and then everyone that comes across that border has paid the cartel a lot, or promised the cartels a lot of money. They arrive in the U.S. into kind of a second-class citizenry. And they are still controlled by the cartels, and they are exploited by U.S. employers, or can be. I'm not saying everybody's bad, but the other side of the equation is the other power elite want lower wages. They want to pay less for labor, and so that's really the big secret on the U.S. desire at the leadership level to why they let them in. It wasn't that we had suddenly around the world more people hurting and they needed to come and be in a refugee status in the U.S. It was simply the fact that we opened up the back gate, threw it on the ground, and said, "Come on in." For the votes and for the lower wages. Well, what has resulted is 9 million people that are in indentured servitude, because everyone that comes across is still controlled by the cartel, and their families are in known places under a threat south of the border. And so you have really modern day American slavery. So the new image is the Statue of Liberty at Ellis Island, come to America as we are a land of immigrants. That is what makes us great, but we need to do it carefully. The new image everybody needs to have instead of Statue of Liberty is a rape tree, is a fentanyl mule, is a baby that is used a dozen times back and forth across the border to allow a composite fake family to come across. And that happens every day, all day long. This is just big business living off the peddling flesh and putting a spear of humanity into America to split it across and change it forever, and killing and just ruining lives in the process. And it will eventually ruin Americans' lives. And they're not going to be safe any longer. These people come from places where high walls and embedded glass is a standard around a house. That's not the standard in America. There's 2 panes of glass usually, if you're lucky, if you're fortunate, and there's a deadbolt lock at the door. That's not going to keep out the bad actors who walk up from Panama. And so in a situation where first responders are overwhelmed, it doesn't take much for people's safety to be completely turned upside down, and to we think back to what I call the BLM summer. But now we have millions of people who are either malactors or and the majority of them are good people, but they are controlled by the cartels. And so what do you do with that? These are not going to be productive, healthy Americans. We have broke them on the way in here, and we need to make this right. So I'm sorry I went too long, but if Norway's any bit like this, then God help us. We need to all get together from coast to coast and inform the people so that we can collectively tell our leadership in a way that matters that we're not going to stand for it.
So that is exactly why I wanted to have this conversation with you, Jay, because, our leadership across Europe, in Norway, across the US and the whole Western civilization are working together on a global scale to force these policies down our throat. It is a policy constructed so-called crisis, this whole immigration problem. And I don't know how much the average U.S. citizen has heard about what was going on in Europe, but it is true what you're saying, that immigration is used as a weapon. And we saw it with Germany, has tried to use immigration to gain more power and money from the European Union. Turkey was pushing so much people over the border, flooding Greece and whichever country they could, up until the point where now Greece has to defend its border with border patrols, and they don't shoot people, but they are able to. That is still going on. We had immigrants were flooded across Belarus. Russia has used this tactic. It is being used to destabilize Europe. And there is another element that is very different from Europe to the United States, and that is United States has always had sort of a rich multicultural society with, the foundation of the American spirit and value system, the Christian value system that all people in the US share. Europe we don't have that. We are a long history of independent nations with different, we're not the same. We're not that same centralized kind of continent as the US is. And so they're trying to pull off a federal government through the European Union and make us all be the same, but it's really hard. What surprises me is how many people are just, they're accepting this because we have the story of the boiling frog, and they're doing this on so many levels. We'll get back to a little more on the political side, because you are running for Congress 2024 for Texas, and I really want to hear more about how you experienced Texas when you came back and why you decided to run. But when you see these differences between Europe and US, we're still very similar, because it is a politically constructed demolition of our societies. And how much are the American people paying attention to what is going on in Europe? How much do you really know about the Islam basically coming in, burning down our churches? I don't know, I get surprised every time I hear about a person that hasn't heard about the teacher Samuel Paty and how he was beheaded in broad daylight in a street in France. And we had so many terror attacks. And it's true also what you say, they don't want to assimilate. They want to bring their culture to Europe. And as a country up north, because Norway is far up north, we have a lot of people coming our way that has been through the entire Europe before they come to us. And still we're allowing this to happen. So it is a centralized, organized crisis that they have inflicted upon the people of all the nations. So how does that differ from the U.S. I mean, you always had a strong, well, not necessarily a strong border, but the discussion about the U.S. border has always been present. But the European borders didn't really come into the attention of the people until 2015. And so now we're seeing that the same people that want to come to Europe or has come to Europe, go to the US border, throw away their Norwegian passport, in which we have been so kind to give them. And they're just throwing it away. They're making their way into the US. Why is that? Why are you allowing that?
Well, yeah, it's crazy that we're allowed. I can tell you, the population, if they understood it, would not allow it. There are people that are tolerating it because they don't see it in their day-to-day lives. Now that our governor in Texas has been shipping migrants north after they've been accepted by the U.S. federal government into the U.S., we've sent them to New York and other places, and people are feeling that pain, and they can sort of appreciate what the issue is a little bit. But I think it is an awareness issue. We're not really paying attention to what's happening in Europe as far as the migration flows. This is insidious, and it's hard to feel when it is spread out, amongst millions of bodies, and so it's not really, they're not high inflection points that bring our attention to a sudden sort of crises. And so this is something, the frog boiling, as you well said. So I would say that it's hard for people to buy this narrative that this is intentional, and because they can't get their head around why it's intentional. They feel like their values, my people here, in the U.S. and maybe Europeans, because it's not their everyday experience. And so you have to have, I think, understand that who would do all this? Let's start there. And why would they do it? So here we pay so much attention on the cartels. Well, the cartels are just profiteers. They're privateers. They're the pirates that just did it for profit. And they are, kind of used as the stormtroopers of the pirates on our border to create the chaos and to allow and to facilitate the movement of migrants north. But the real Machiavellian criminal here, the Dr. Evil, if you will, to use pop culture, it is truly a China, and not China, the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, in cooperation with the Russians. In my entire career, we always feared Russia and China moving closer together and cooperating because they had two sides of a combined, very dangerous coin. And so now that this administration, my own administration here in the U.S., has done things to push them together and to cooperate like never before, you have that toxic combination of really high end strategy and really high end capability and muscle. And so, the former being China, the latter being Russia, and they both are extremely complex in how they do things. But so China, they approach war in a completely different way. I would submit we are in a hybrid Third World War right now. And our marginal line is the U.S. southern border, if you will. And because all of our enemies, near peer and non-near peer, in other words, Chinese state level enemy or lower level enemy, proxies of Iran, are on massed at our border. Okay, and so you have a corrupt government down there who is helping facilitate this, and you have it's remarkable. So the people are caught up in what I think is a CCP constructed scenario where they're leveraging everybody's weaknesses all at once, and it's called systems of systems theory in the way they do this. And so they understand our politicians in power right now want votes and want to stay in power. Great, so the migrants come and we lower the policy, and it's convenient bedfellows, as we say, and so or they're frenemies. I hate to use jargon with you guys because that's tough. But what I'm saying is that we lowered the the rules to get in the U.S. and they come. Chinese are facilitating the arrival of that with monies and with pressure, and so then they come, and the Chinese also know that we want lower wages, and so that's our leverage points. That's our weakness there, but they do it all across the board. I mean, and so Russia has attacked Ukraine. Well, okay, and that's a big distraction for us. I feel like Putin could have rolled into Kiev in 3 weeks. Instead, we've kind of had what I call a sniper pit. They've killed the first squad member in this analogy of a what I think Kiev is, and slowly guys are coming in to try to pull out their patrol buddy, and that's in the form of monies, and we're getting bled, our treasury into Ukraine. To what effect? They've lost, and then the propaganda machine continues that Ukraine's going to win in 2 weeks. They're not going to win in 2 weeks. Their own chief of staff said, we can't, we're done. But they've suppressed that, and he's gone away. So Israel is, under attack. Well, of course, Americans all care about Israel. But how did that happen? We just, and that's distracting us, okay? And we're supporting Israel, and we should. But again, we're looking away from our southern approach. All right. So, I hate to say it, and I don't want to sound, hegemonic, but if you take out America, it's going to be a real problem for the rest of the West. And so, we are, Israel's under attack, and we're under attack. And Americans need to realize we're literally under attack. Europe's under attack. And it's, it's people who are unwittingly the tools of that. And they are, they're change agents. And so, yes, you can want a better life for your family, and that's wonderful. We have a place for many people from anywhere in the world here, but you need to come here and do it in the correct way, and to assimilate into our culture and be a productive member of our culture and give back and enter into our social contract. We're not going to change our social contract for you, okay? And leadership, you can try to do whatever they want. Americans and Europeans need to become better informed so that we can enforce those things and maintain our national identity, which has been so successful. It's not egocentric or xenophobic or whatever to say this is our country, this is how it operates. You've come here, you can join, on a limited scale, whatever makes sense for your society. That's not what's happening. And I can tell you as a Texan, you asked about my race. I've returned home for 28 years of military service. I've helped defend our allies' borders all over the world. I come home to my own kicked wide open. It's offensive, and aside from the whole existential concern. But the Mexican Texas population has lived symbiotically for hundreds of years. And we really began that way. The settlers that came from the East Coast of the United States to Texas and helped settle it married into Mexicans' families. That's how you became landed. You could not get a land grant unless you were married in to the Mexican family, literally. We are at our origin an integrated land of Mexicans and Texans. And then together, when Mexico was oppressive as a sovereign over Texas, we threw that off, kind of like the U.S. threw off the UK. And that was in the famous Alamo struggle in San Jacinto, and we kicked out the General Santa Anna. But there were more Tejanos, Mexican heritage Texans, we call them Tejanos, than there were Texians, and that were the other guys. There were more Tejanos than Texians in the battle for the Alamo. And so we began this experiment together, and we need to continue and grab back this experiment together, and that is the experiment of democracy. And I use that in a humble way. That's why I say experiment. We need to grab back our land. We need to take back our land together and continue to help it prosper for the good of everyone. Because any one of us go down in the West, we're becoming limited in mindset about free principles and about equality and right to practice religion and all that. Because as you said, in Minneapolis right now we have 5 calls to prayer a day. So this is happening in our country too. The Somalis that entered into that area, we refugee resettled. to try to help and to bring them out of a bad situation. They have said, no, we reject your culture and we demand to change yours. And they are trying to bring in Sharia law into that area. So it starts to grow and expand. So I have nothing against Muslims. I have lots of Muslim friends. But when I go to Bahrain, right, because I've been stationed there, I participate, not in the religious culture, of course, but I participate in their culture and I obey their rules. I respect them. The same needs to happen in the West, and we can live and work together really well. The Abraham Accords proved it. Our last president and our future president masterfully worked towards a common interest for everyone to prosper. And we need to get back to and that challenged some leadership around the world, significantly China, who is now latched on with Russia, and they're working together. So if you think this is all crazy that I'm talking about, no, these are enemies we've been fighting for a long time. My entire career, I've studied them. I watched them do this in Africa. They're going to do it here. And it's just a little more complex here. But, if we can just stop watching TikTok, which is a programming tool anyway, by the CCP, then we can look up and do what the West does best. And we can get back to our values and agree that we like how things are, because the people coming at us don't want it to be that way. And it will be more like African places that are destabilized. There's a lot of beautiful African places. I love Africa. But there are populations there that really should be harbingers, that have been sent into other populations and split the country so that people can pirate their lands. So people can change their leadership and live off of a population like a parasite. The global world elite certainly doing that, but they're kind of pawnish to China anyways. Convenient bedfellows, though. Okay, you have China, the global world elite, who think they have the hubris to think they can control this. Good on them to try to control the Chinese experiment. And then Russia. I mean, these are sovereign nations. They vehemently defend their sovereignty, yet they are behind changing ours. China will say to anybody that listens, hey, we respect sovereignty. We're going to come. We don't want to change any borders of land. Yet they move in, take your port, and sort of a pawn shark, capitalism. And when I say pawn shark, I don't know if there's an equivalent there, but it's debt capitalism. And then they move in further, and they start to own more and more. And they're doing it in the U.S. In the military industrial complex, they try to find that one little bolt to take out of a weapon system and kill that supply chain. And then so the whole thing falls down. Well, the bolt for us is our heart. And that weapon is a mass population that's being pushed, tragically so. I feel so bad for these families that just want to make a better life. And I say come, but do it right. Go back home. The head of the line is in a U.S. consulate at your country of origin or country of host, and start there, because you have been lied to, and it's not going to go well for you. The cartels own you right now, and we have to completely change what's happened. And it's been, I think we've got one eye and one nose out of the boiling frog pot right now, but we can still climb out.
We can still climb out. That's because you can get a little overwhelmed when you look at all these things. You said Sharia law. We have, I don't know how much people are aware of what's going on in Sweden, for instance, but they have a Sharia political party, actually. And this is going on all over Europe. They're trying to impose Sharia on the native population. Native European population, but yeah, it is a you can't control how this pans out. And I thought that was very, very well said by Tucker Carlson at America Fest, when he says, if you think there's a plan, there's not. Is why it's all so chaotic. And that came into mind when you said China is pulling strings. China is buying infrastructures, a lot of infrastructure in Europe and everywhere else. And yeah, if you want to flood a country with migrants to lower the wages, okay, but isn't that contradictory to what China, like what would happen if you get the wages so low that you can start having industry in the U.S. again? I mean, isn't it all just and I'm sorry I'm going to say this, but a clusterfuck on a global level?
It is. That's almost a military term, I have to say. we use that whenever a soldier says that, or a sailor, things are getting bad. And so, yes, it is that on a global level. People are trying to conquer the West. And China certainly sees itself as the hegemon of the world. They do not believe in a multipolar world. Whenever they talk about that, that's a lie. When they joined the WTO, the World Trade Organization, in 2013, I think it was, they haven't complied once. We thought we would westernize them when Jimmy Carter showed up, and what was that, 79? And we thought we would just give them a big Western bear hug, and they'd come along gladly. No, they have not, because the CCP is a cancer on that society, and the poor people in China are absolutely being oppressed. In a future we're all going to live, we should look into the mainland of China and understand how Chinese live from day to day, and understand it from not just what you see on the surface, but understand it from a technological and really a permission level. Social credits control everything they do there. They're watched by closed circuit television their whole lives. The Chinese Communist Party probably knows if a family's going to conceive before they do. So I think we're looking at that fast forward future here. Because why? Because it's more profitable. Because if you are going to rig a system, and you're a top elite corporation, or you're a nation that thinks that people don't have individual rights unless you're an elite person, then population control is paramount. Our successes as a free loving, civil liberty, giving, granting, guaranteeing West. That has brought us to this point of the success, and the technology we have right now is being used against us, as is our own kindness and goodwill. And so we just need to pay attention and be defiant on protecting those things. And we need to, though, be aware of the threat. And the problem is the threat it looks like millions of innocent souls who just show up and are themselves. And I'm sorry, if you come from a very traditional Muslim background, and you are brought in under the lie that you don't have to change that country that you arrived in, well, then you're an agent of change too, and you are unwittingly trying to do a much bigger picture. And to think that the ulama is going to maintain control through this imagined experiment, or what China and Russia and everybody's trying to do here in Davos, absolutely not. Okay, that is not going to be utopia on earth for them through this method. And I don't subscribe to their ideology or their, but I'm saying in their own mind, there's not a good end there either, because there's going to be no place for religion. There's going to be no place for orderly control as you have in some very well organized Muslim countries that is not taken into the technocrats' hands.
Exactly. Jay, can I ask you, because Texas is sort of a little beacon of hope. You gave us a little bit background about how Texas came to be, and it is and has always been a state that is very freedom loving, and trying to tame a Texan, I'm not going to try to do that. You have had politicians that has been quote unquote rebellious. You stopped migration for a period of time, even though the federal government wanted to they sued you, I think, for doing that. And so how can Texas contribute to changing what's going on in the U.S.? Because you have been standing strong for a long time, and you're still strong in the sense of being very true to U.S. values. So how will Texas contribute, and especially moving forward to the election next year? which we could have talked about for about an hour, I think, regarding what happened with ballots in Colorado and everything that's going on, trying to take Trump off as a presidential candidate. And you're a Republican, so I'm sure you have your opinions on that. But how will Texas contribute into this? How is there a chance for Texas to push the federal government really hard and to take more control on state level?
Absolutely, Rebecca, and thanks for that endorsement there. We'll take it. Texans, we might be known for having an ego, but I think in this case we need to use it, right? Ken Paxton, who you talked about, as one of those politicians that's pushing back really hard, and people look at him as America's attorney general, because he is pushing back hard against the federal government, who is suing us, and we're suing them. We're giving it right back. So, no, Texas as a land, and we were once a republic. To finish the story about coming together as Mexicans, Texans, and forming Texans, and now we look at ourselves as a monolith. We are Texans first. Now, there may be families that cross the southern border and have forever, and they have families down south and families in Texas, and that's great and that's wonderful. And that's just a reality. Some people live on one side of the border and work on another in both directions, and that's perfectly fine as long as it's orderly. We know who you are, and it's able. We're able to maintain our sovereignty. So yes, what is Texas going to do? Texas is going to take a lead with other southwestern states to reestablish a border. And we have to reestablish a border in every sense that a border implies. I mean, a border means it is demarcation. And for a country's border, it means it's a divide from one country to the other. So no, you can't just walk in if you want to. No, you can't bring us under threat and threaten my children. No, you can't, take my future. You can't change my way of life. Okay, so that is a sovereign border, and we're going to take the lead in defending that sovereign border. And Texas has a few ways that through our own constitution that we can do that. The federal government is not living up to their responsibility to do so. The federal government's number one job to the states is to defend them and national security. Because it is an international border. But they're not. They've ceded that, and they can say that they are all day long, but their words do not match the actions, and the result is the evidence. And so it's just obvious, and people need to understand that this what I call CCP cartel capitalism that extends from D.C. to Mexico City and begins at Beijing, and on the way here they pick up Tehran and all of their fun enemies on the way to arrive at our southwestern border. That big money machine, as orchestrated and expressed already, is something we have to stop at the Texas border. That marginal line that I was talking about, because it's not only important, it's a non-political issue. If people could wake up to see what's going on, they wouldn't care about those social issues that divide us. When our security and livelihood and future is under threat. In Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the number one thing, it's this triangle of Maslow. I don't know if you know the psychologist, but security, and I've seen this happen in Africa over and over again. When a family's under threat, okay, and when the bad guys come in, they aren't worried about anything else other than defending that bad guy. And that is number one, and that is a non-political, that's a non-partisan issue. And we need to wake up and realize we're at that point that the table is set. The bad people that came in, the wolves in sheep's clothing that came in through the migration flow of the southwestern border, they are among us now. Every community is a border community right now. So in one voice, we need to come together and tell the stories that we encounter. And again, it's small, so it's insidious. And maybe, okay, I can deal with that. I can move over a little here. I'll walk around that guy, at the metro station. And so it's slow until it's fast. And so, and of social change. And so, in Texas, we're going to lock down the border. We're going to this next wave that comes through. We're going to get back into office. people that care about the future of this country, not every country in some imagined utopia. Every time humans try to imagine some sort of reordering and create peace and perfect harmony on Earth as instrumented by man, it ends up in the most cruelest, most deadly sort of experiment. And I'm speaking to communism, Stalinism, Maoism, all those that have killed hundreds of millions of people because they sold the lie of utopia, a godless utopia on Earth with man at the center that always devolves into chaos and death. And that's not freedom. So here we need to get back to our first principles. We're going to defend our border. We're going to change the policy. We're going to kill the demand signals, what I call it. We're going to change, get rid of, we're going to promote legislation that gets rid of sanctuary, defund sanctuary cities. We're going to, try to change the head of the of Homeland, the people charged with the duties to do this. We need to probably deputize all the National Guard on the border to handle the issue. We need to bring back the people that are in our country to asylum hearings and then move them out of the country and tell them to start over again. If they comply with that, great. They can enter again legal, or they can apply to enter again legally at the head of the line, the consulates in other countries, not at our southern border masked. We're going to cooperate with the Mexican government, and hopefully they have a change. I've been talking with Edward Verstegi. He did Sound of Freedom, and he is running as an independent candidate in Mexico. A change there is what they need because it's corrupt left and right in Mexico. And it's not a great situation. We need to increase trade with Mexico in a way that matters, that profits Mexicans and Texans, or Mexicans and Americans, in a way that makes sense for both, and all grow together in a greater economy that all of our children could thrive in. There are things we can do, but right now we have to have an absolute moratorium on asylum, and we have to stop it, and then we have to sort out who's here and push them back where they belong. And then we have to then at the same time change the policies for the demand signals I talked about, and really and get accountability in DC. I've lived there off and on since 2016 in between deployments, and I can tell you they're all feeding out of the same trough. And I keep on using these terms that maybe don't make sense in Europe, but they're all eating out of the same bowl. And I say I'm talking about, special moneyed interests that don't represent the people. And so there's precious few people there that are not completely influenced by or largely influenced by special moneyed interests that don't represent Americans' greater interests. And they forgot why they were there. When Big Pharma has the biggest lobby by two, they are twice as much the money put towards lobbying in DC as even the defense industrial complex. That's an issue, and we lived through that. We lived through the result of that in COVID, and that probably had other drivers as well that kind of parallel to what we're talking about. I was a vaccine mandate whistleblower in the Navy at the end of my service, and when they made it mandatory, we had only half the service vaccinated, and I rose my head and said, "This isn't right." And I pushed out a white paper. No one wanted to hear it. So then a news journal picked it up and it went viral. And then I was on Tucker to talk about it. No one wanted to hear about it because, I marched all over DC with my affidavit whistleblower report that documented chapter and verse how from the Secretary of Defense level on down to the commander, how they were pushing illegal orders, trying to mandate experimental medicine or experimentally authorized or authorized only vaccine that was not FDA approved. And there was this word game and everybody was forced to get this thing. I said, why are we putting everybody in the same experimental group? Well, on the migrant issue, we're all being thrown in the same experimental group. This imagined utopia on Earth, somebody voted, no one voted for that. But leadership said this is going to be better for our control, and we're going to force it on you in this WEF wet dream, and it's not going to work out for anyone in the end. And it's and I wish people could see that. I come from Africa, where there are countries under siege there, from migrant populations being pushed around in a crony capitalism. We are headed towards crony capitalism in a way that is more akin to some poor, unfortunate countries in Africa. And those leaders have complete control of those populations. And if they're a democracy in name only, they're a foil. So, we're headed towards that sort of dissemblance, and the population is a weapon, and we need to make right to those families and put them back where they went, and then say, let's try this again the right way, and let's say true things. So, it's the Democrats want votes, the businesses want cheap labor, but really it's China that wants to end us and Russia that wants to end us, and they're working together. And we should sit up and pay attention, American and European people.
You're absolutely right. There is a lot going on in parallels. You mentioned the vaccine. It's the medical industrial complex, you could say. There are the climate change policies, the climate hysteria. Like, there is a lot of things going on at the same time to try to, you could call it utopia, but destroy nations. That is what they're doing. It's interesting that you mentioned Africa, because at least in Africa, they still have their head screwed on right. And I mean that in the tribal areas and populations. I don't know if you ever saw Matt Walsh's What is a Woman? But when he asked those African tribes if a man can become a woman, the way they just crack out in laughter and, just finds it absolutely ridiculous, tells us that we in the Western world actually have to upgrade to get on tribe level mentally, value in our values and what we're doing with this through political policies. And we do have a few Norwegian American viewers, Jay. So what would you say to them would be your main goal of Congress in 2024?
Well, so my platform is land, liberty, prosperity. But we hope to manifest that in a way that's action, not talking. And so every one of those planks, if you will, we are going to try to walk out that platform and be demonstrative of what we hope, it would look like once elected, God willing elected. We're completely, operating under God's, direction and favor and blessing, and until we're not. So, or until that's says do something else. But listen, to the Norwegian Americans, I would say, continue to believe in America, because America is the people. A nation is a people. A nation is not its leadership. When as an officer in the Navy, I do not swear fealty to any leader. It's only to the Constitution. I am obligated by solemn oath to defend the Constitution. The Constitution is constituted by the people in a constitutional republic, and that's what we came up with. Now, that really only works if you have people that understand the rule of law in their hearts. External control of governance does not work in an American constituted democracy or republic, and that democratic experiment. It only works so long as each man and woman are involved in that experiment, take part in government, but come at it from a place where they have that rule of law in their heart. When Tocqueville came to the United States in the mid 1800s and was trying to figure out why we were doing it, why we got it so right, and why France was on there, I don't know at that point, Third Republic, Fourth, at that time. He was trying to study us to understand what they could get right in policy, just right. If we just get the rules just right, which is a lot of my friends in Africa's countries, there's more constitutional lawyers in Africa trying to get their governance right. They figure they just get the formula right. One day they'll be America. No, for our country, it's specific, and every country has their own version of it. But in America at the time that the French philosopher Tocqueville was looking at it, if I could just boil down, his result was, no, this is not a top-down driven experiment. We cannot say in the parliament, these are the rules and then it's going to work. We just got the formula right, hold your mouth right, and stand on one foot and it's going to work. No, it came from the heart of the people, which came from the Cornerstone Church, and there was a church in every corner, and really it was a ground up governance. And so to the Norwegian Americans, I'll say, you're part of that. And, get back to first principles. And if you're a Christian, go back to church and become involved and seek, we are, a land constituted under God. Work that way, and the blessing that we've had from that has been immense. It's historically immense, and I'd say overall, America has risen the watermark for the world many times over. If we could get back to that, then we will all profit. Our kids will collectively have a better future together, and we don't have to stumble into some sort of blindly stumble into some sort of another utopian experiment of globalism, which is again. Profit or I guess manipulated by a Chinese construct or a Chinese weapon of war, and really a Russian as well. And those two guys together are manipulating a lot of what we're saying, and that's the wokeism you're talking about, fracturing the family is part of that. We are under attack in every which way you can. The way you stop it is get back to first principles. The way you stop it is get back to your community and look for community solutions. Don't wait on the government to show up. Okay, and the border. Don't wait for the government to show up. Demand the solutions at the community level, and then work out from there. If in the U.S., the U.S. Constitution only says that the federal government should do three things. That's national defense, interstate commerce, and foreign affairs. Everything else is overreach. In Texas, and Texans believe in that sort of limited government more than a lot of places. And if we could, as Texans, get back to that and work out our solutions with Texans, and work out solutions as communities on both sides of the border who are just under siege by our leadership, then we could get back to where we need to get to. And Norwegian Americans, Mexican Americans, because that's what we are, but whatever your descendancy is. We could get back to the process of, or back to the project of making America great, which makes everyone else great, because we really don't want to be a pariah on the world. The foreign wars and the things that we have done of late, really been very unfortunate. We've defended democracy in the sense of like World War II and World War I, and I think we've helped the world in that regard. But Ukraine is not a democracy. It's a lie of a democracy. We started, Ukraine's had problems for many years, but we really started this current one in 2014 on a couple administrations ago. And Americans need to sit up and pay attention to that. We don't need to do, any more forays into the Middle East. It's, unfortunately, we've kicked the anthill and angered a lot of people in the name of going out and just doing something. Well, I don't think we really knew what we were doing. We need to take care of a few bad actors and then go home, so that we can get about the business of doing our country right first. So, a lot of this stuff is distractions. A lot of it is profiteering, and much of that is a result of too much government consolidated too far away from the people giving them money to do it. So get involved in politics, or get involved in your community, which gets you involved in the issues in community, and then make your leadership responsive to that. So thanks for pitching the Norwegian American thing.
Here, Jay. Yeah. Well, there are a lot of Norwegian Americans that say to descend from Norwegian, but also Norwegians that live in the USA, and we have one reporter with us that lives in Florida, and she's very involved with with what's going on in the United States, and is a great reporter for us. And so I really want to thank you for coming on and sharing your story about Germany and how this has all developed for you, because it is about sharing these stories, as you said, to get a common understanding of what's going on, because the mainstream media is not doing it for us. They are not trying to let you know what's going on, and they're lying most of the time. And so by sharing stories and understanding that we are under the same thumb of globalists on this side of the Atlantic and the other side of the Atlantic, may actually unite us in going back to those first principles to make sure that we can keep the United States and Europe and the Western world as brilliant as it was up until this point.
Can't agree more, Rebecca.
Thank you so much for taking the time out, Jay. I don't want to say wish you luck. Bless be your campaign, and hopefully we'll have you back on when next year comes around and to see what's going on throughout 2024. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I look forward to it. Blessings to you.